Iran is covertly forming a new anti-Western alliance in Africa without fear of the West. Iran appears to be aware of the threat the West poses to Africa and is assisting Africa in resisting, as seen by its decision to share its security knowledge with Burkina Faso. The question many are asking now is, how come the West is allowing this to occur? Or is it incapable of stopping it? Is the West able to overlook Iran's increasing influence in Burkina Faso? Or has it already passed up the opportunity to take action? Let's investigate. What happens when a country that has been subject to international isolation and sanctions for a long time begins to exert influence well beyond its typical bounds? Iran, a nation frequently ignored by the West, is boldly entering West Africa and providing Burkina Faso with its security know-how. Taken aback, the West frantically attempts to react. However, this goes beyond simple diplomacy. It's a calculated power maneuver that challenges the West's historical hegemony in Africa. Iran is moving forward, and the West needs to be aware of this. The chief diplomat for Tehran stationed in Ouagadougou, Motaba Fadihi, has stated that Iran is willing to impart its knowledge to Burkina Faso in vital domains such as health, security, and the economy. This is not simply any diplomatic gesture. Rather, it is a strategic turn toward a closer collaboration as Burkina Faso slips away from Western-controlled organizations like ECOWAS, alongside its colleagues in the recently created Alliance of Sahel States. It's not by coincidence that the timing is right. Under military control, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are re-establishing their connections with non-Western powers, such as Iran and Russia, indicating a shift in their position on the international scene. In order to fully comprehend the significance of Tehran's growing influence in West Africa, we must first understand the motivations behind Tehran's interest in Burkina Faso and the objectives Iran hopes to achieve through this strategic alliance. What then is Iran's interest in West Africa? Burkina Faso continues to stand despite US sanctions and imperial aggressions. It is reaching out to Iran in an attempt to create a new world. Although Tehran's interest in West Africa may appear to be a sudden development, it is actually a planned maneuver. Iran has been isolated economically and diplomatically for many years, especially by Western nations. Iran is now compelled to look for new economic and allies due to its isolation. Iran has strengthened its relations with non-Western nations like China and Russia over time. Furthermore, it is currently spreading into areas like West Africa that have historically been ruled by the West. In recent years, the Sahel region, which includes nations like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, has grown increasingly unstable. Political unrest, economic hardship, and the emergence of rebel organizations have left a security void that has not been filled by interventions led by the West. Iran saw an opportunity to intervene and offer these countries the knowledge they sorely require, given its extensive experience with asymmetric warfare and insurgencies. However, why now? Add your voice to the total liberation of Africa by leaving a comment in the comments section below. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more informative videos like this one. Let's proceed. In the current period of international relations transition from a unipolar to a multipolar world, President Raisi's journey to Africa is consistent with his administration's efforts to forge new alliances with non-Western countries. Glued to a multipolar framework, it also aligns with his view of the East policy, which aims to deepen political and economic ties with non-Western nations. Iran wants stronger ties with Africa in order to broaden its economic base. A significant shift in the political landscape of the region has occurred with the founding of the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, which consists of Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. All of these nations, who are under military rule, have made it plain that they will no longer submit to organizations like ECOWAS that are under Western influence. The AES countries are expressing their desire for more autonomy and independence from the West by leaving ECOWAS and forging their own alliance. Herein lies the role of Iran. Iran views the AES as a possible partner in its larger conflict with Western dominance. Iran is presenting itself as a useful partner for the AES countries as they work to develop their own security and economic systems, free from Western meddling, by providing its experience in these areas. This is not just about aiding Burkina Faso. It's also about Iran forging allies and gaining power in a region long dominated by the West. Moreover, Iran's engagement in Burkina Faso is a component of a bigger plan to strengthen its position internationally. Iran has been attempting to subvert Western hegemony for a long time, especially in the Middle East. It is currently searching for new areas to influence, such as West Africa, outside of its conventional sphere of influence. Iran is breaking the West's hegemony of the region and acquiring new economic and political allies by forming partnerships with nations such as Burkina Faso. Although Iran's reasons for interacting with Burkina Faso are evident, what benefits does Burkina Faso expect from this relationship? Or, to put it another way, what benefits Burkina Faso from Iran's knowledge? Iran's own sense of isolation is one. US sanctions are still in place, but it is also working to make repairs. Like many other nations in the Sahel, Burkina Faso is facing a number of serious difficulties. The most significant of them is the increasing threat posed by insurgent groups, who have expanded their influence due to the region's porous borders and governmental instability. Burkina Faso has faced years of instability and security challenges in spite of backing from Western countries and international organizations. But the West's answers have frequently proven to be ineffectual, if not harmful. One of the main causes of Burkina Faso's appeal to Iran for assistance is the failure of Western-led efforts in the Sahel. Burkina Faso's current military government acknowledges the failure of the Western strategy for security. Insurgent organizations like Boko Haram and Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb continue to be a serious danger to national security even after years of international aid and military support. Iran's offer of security expertise is especially attractive in this scenario. Iran has struggled for decades with insurgencies and asymmetric warfare, both inside its own borders and via its numerous Middle Eastern proxy groups. Iran has demonstrated a profound comprehension of fighting unconventional warfare against non-state entities, as seen by its engagement in the Syrian civil war and its backing for Lebanon. Burkina Faso, which is dealing with comparable issues from insurgent groups operating in the Sahel, may find great value in this experience. Iran has experience managing a faltering economy and coping with economic sanctions in addition to its expertise in counterinsurgency operations. Has been largely dependent on loans and foreign help from global financial organizations like the World Bank and the IMF, much like many other nations in the area. Nevertheless, Burkina Faso is frequently forced to enact measures that may not be in its best interests by the conditions connected to this funding. Burkina Faso might lessen its reliance on Western help and investigate other economic models that provide more autonomy and self-sufficiency by forming a partnership with Iran. The development of a pharmaceutical production unit is a crucial element of Iran's proposal to Burkina Faso. Given that Burkina Faso's healthcare system has long been underfunded and overburdened, this is a huge development. Burkina Faso's healthcare system has flaws that were made clear by the COVID-19 pandemic, and a large number of its citizens still lack access to basic medical care. Iran is assisting Burkina Faso in strengthening its healthcare system and lowering its dependency on foreign medications by establishing a pharmaceutical production facility. Additionally, the development of a pharmaceutical sector in Burkina Faso may yield wider economic advantages. It would boost regional industries, generate jobs, and lessen the nation's reliance on foreign aid. Long-term, This might contribute to Burkina Faso's economic development by making it more resilient and self-sufficient and less susceptible to shocks from outside sources. Although Burkina Faso stands to gain greatly from this cooperation, Iran's engagement in West Africa has wider ramifications that go beyond economic growth and security. This collaboration is a component of a wider geopolitical conflict taking place on a worldwide scale. How, therefore, does this collaboration counteract Western influence? Using a combination of military support, economic aid, and diplomatic pressure, the West has maintained its dominant position in Africa for decades, exerting control over the political and economic affairs of African countries. Organizations like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and ECOWAS have been essential in preserving this domination. These organizations, nonetheless, have frequently come under fire for enforcing requirements that put the demands of Western powers ahead of those of African countries. The development of the Sahel States Alliance and its strengthening connections with non-Western nations like Russia and Iran pose a serious threat to the West's long-standing hegemony in the area. Iran is gaining more clout in West Africa and lessening the power of the West in the region by forming relationships with nations such as Burkina Faso. The failure of Western-led operations in the region is a major factor in the countries such as Burkina Faso's retreat from the West. The security situation in the Sahel has worsened despite years of military support from the US, France, and other Western nations. The activities of insurgent groups have grown, and governments are finding it more challenging to hold on to power in their own regions due to political unrest. Iran, on the other hand, bases its security strategy on its own encounters with asymmetric warfare and insurgencies. Iran has concentrated on establishing connections with regional militias and proxy groups and giving them the tools and training they require to fight on the ground, as opposed to depending solely on massive military operations. This strategy has helped Iran accomplish its geopolitical goals in the Middle East, and it may work better as a template for nations like Burkina Faso that are having trouble reining in rebel groups. A broader geopolitical upheaval in the global balance of power is reflected in Iran's increasing sway over West Africa. Iran has strengthened its relations with China and Russia, the two most powerful non-Western nations in the world, in recent years. China and Russia have been extending their spheres of influence throughout Africa, and Iran's engagement in Burkina Faso may be considered a component of this larger plan. Significant progress has been made in the region by Russia in particular. By way of the Wagner Group, a private military contractor, Russia has been giving military assistance to nations such as Mali, which has recently turned away from the West along with Burkina Faso. Through its Belt and Road Initiative, China has been making significant investments in infrastructure projects throughout Africa in an effort to strengthen its political and economic ties to the continent. Burkina Faso is putting itself in a position to profit from Iran's larger relationships with China and Russia by siding with Tehran, in addition to getting access to Tehran's experience. This might provide Burkina Faso access to fresh funding and development support, lessening its dependency on the West even more. How is the West addressing this dilemma as Iran and other non-Western states continue to increase their influence in Africa? Do Western countries continue to cling to their outdated tactics, or are they adjusting to the new reality? Iran's expanding influence in West Africa has mostly prompted a reactionary response from the West. The West has intensified its use of economic sanctions and military engagement in the region, rather than reconsidering its strategy. But as nations like Mali and Burkina Faso seek out new alliances with non-Western powers and distance themselves from Western-led organizations like ECOWAS, these tactics are looking less and less viable. ECOWAS, a regional body that has historically supported Western interests, has been one of the principal instruments used by the West to keep control over West Africa. The West threatened military action after Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger left ECOWAS and established the AES. In response to pressure from Western nations, ECOWAS even thought about using force to bring back democracy in Niger after the July 2023 military coup. But this oppressive strategy has simply made the Sahel countries more hostile. As the failure of military operations in the region spearheaded by the West has become more evident, nations such as Burkina Faso are no longer prepared to take Western domination at face value. By forming an alliance with Russia and Iran, these countries are indicating that they are prepared to forge their own course without intervention from the West. The West has depended on economic sanctions in addition to military threats to keep its sway over Africa. But frequently, the opposite has happened as a result of these sanctions, pushing African countries to look for different sources of funding and development support. Iran has made the offer to establish a pharmaceutical production facility in Burkina Faso in direct response to the West's inadequate support of the nation's healthcare infrastructure. By providing workable answers, Iran is presenting itself as a more dependable partner than the West in response to Burkina Faso's development concerns. This is a part of a wider trend where African countries are looking more and more to non-Western powers for development help and investment. For instance, China's Belt and Road Initiative has invested billions of dollars in infrastructure in African countries, and Russia has been escalating its military presence in the area by means of the Wagner Group. The West's dependence on sanctions and aid is a reflection of a deep misperception of the changes occurring in Africa. The Sahel countries are becoming less and less receptive to Western domination and more inclined to seek assistance from non-Western nations such as Iran and Russia. The West is becoming more and more isolated and unimportant in the region as a result of its inability to adjust to this new reality. What does this portend for the future of global power dynamics as the West fights to stay relevant in Africa? Iran and Burkina Faso have a collaboration that extends beyond their bilateral relationship. It reflects a more general change in the balance of power in the world. The West has worked on the presumption that its supremacy in Africa was assured for decades. However, the emergence of fresh coalitions, like the AES, and its expanding connections with China, Russia, and Iran, heralds a new era in world affairs. It is no longer a guarantee that the West will dominate Africa. The alliances that are formed now will influence the future course of the world for many years. The increasing alliances between African countries and non-Western powers, such as Russia and Iran, are a part of a larger trend where African countries are claiming their independence and looking for new alliances that give them more authority over their affairs. This is not just a West African phenomenon. Countries on the continent are looking into alternatives to institutions run by the West and forming fresh partnerships with non-Western nations. These collaborations provide numerous significant advantages for African countries. Above all, they provide African countries more freedom and independence from organizations dominated by the West, such as the World Bank, ECOWAS, and the IMF. African states have the opportunity to investigate alternative development models that are not limited by the demands imposed by Western establishments by collaborating with nations such as China, Iran, and Russia. Through these alliances, African countries get access to fresh funding and development support. China's Belt and Road Initiative, for instance, has brought billions of dollars in infrastructure projects to the continent, and Russia, through Wagner Group and other private military contractors, has been able to bolster its military presence. This larger trend includes Iran's engagement in Burkina Faso, which gives African countries new possibilities for security and economic growth. This change poses a serious threat to the West's long-standing hegemony in Africa. For many years, Western countries have maintained influence over the political and economic affairs of African countries by a combination of economic assistance, military involvement, and diplomatic pressure. But this strategy is no longer effective. The West's dominance in the region is waning as new coalitions between African countries and non-Western powers emerge, posing a challenge to the global power structures that have shaped the post-World War II order. The Iranian engagement in Burkina Faso is only getting started. The global power structure will continue to change, with the West occupying a more peripheral role as African countries seek out new alliances with non-Western powers. This poses a threat to the world system as a whole, not just to Western hegemony in Africa. In order to summarize, Iran and Burkina Faso have a connection that extends beyond their formal ties. It is an image of a world that is changing. The worldwide balance of power is changing as African countries stand up for their independence and look for new alliances. The West, which had grown accustomed to having the upper hand in Africa, now faces new challenges and a different environment. Iran's involvement in Africa is a strong indication of the times. Africa's future is one of independence and choice. The West can no longer afford to take its dominance for granted, and it faces the risk of falling behind in the emerging global order if it does not adjust to this new reality. Is Iran's arrival in West Africa the last straw that will destroy Western hegemony of the region? Is Iran to be welcomed in Burkina Faso? Is this a turning point in global geopolitics? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. We explore the rich history, culture, and the ongoing struggle for sovereignty in Africa. Join us in this important conversation by subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you're not just staying informed, you're becoming part of a movement dedicated to reclaiming Africa's rightful place on the global stage. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Let's work together to spread knowledge and inspire change. Thanks for watching.